Welcome, everyone. My name is Maria Teresa Barbist. I'm part of the SF Artists alumni and will be hosting the Spotlight Talk today. Usually I'm only doing the Zoom, but today I'm actually saying hi. And I am so excited that Cristina Victor will be sharing her beautiful work with us today. Hi, Cristina.
Hi.
Christina is calling in from Charleston, but she is originally from Miami, where I'm living now. So it was really beautiful since we both left San Francisco, how our paths have been crossing, and we've been kind of staying in touch. And you actually graduated with an MFA in 2011
Correct. New
and
genre.
then worked in the admissions office. But I was not there until later on. I think you had left
Mhm.
already, and I graduated in 2014. And so later on, it was kind of like that we kept bumping into each other, and it was like this really nice connection that we kept alive. And so today, I'm just so excited to hear more about your work. And thank you for everyone for joining us today. It's wonderful to see you all, you know, take advantage of this opportunities to really come into the Zoom room. I know everything is recorded and on YouTube as well, but here you can actually ask questions, put it in the chat. Christina is going to do a presentation and then the Q&A after. So, Christina, if you're ready, take it away.
I feel like you downplayed our friendship.
A little, right?
Maria is more Miami now than I will ever be again. And so Maria is my Miami connection, aside from my family. Well, not aside, part of the family, but Maria is usually the first person I go to when I'm in Miami and I'm like, let's hang out. Tell me what's going on.
So true.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be able to talk to SFAI alumni as well. I feel like I talk about SFAI and my experience weekly, sometimes daily. Like it was such an impactful time for me, and I grew so much, and that place just fostered just a unique experience. And I know we all have feelings about the closure, and it's just nice to continue these conversations because we really experienced something special. I'm ready to share whenever. So is it cool to go ahead and share, Maria?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Um, and Maria's going to keep me on task because I tend to just talk, 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 talk. And oh, no, sorry, I meant to slideshow. Give it a second. I'm going to talk about my work, COVID till now. The stuff that happened before, there's a lot, but I feel like I'd rather focus on the shift that COVID or lockdown and just everything that happened after that sort of offered me and how it affected my practice and how I approach. There's really very little separation between my art practice and my life. I've even through grad school, like my work was very autoethnographic and very much about identity and exploring that, through different modes, whether it was performance, video, social practice. And it's interesting to kind of put this together from the context of when a lot of that shifted for me and also my relationship to material, because I went from being very performance based to and social practice and engagement based to then suddenly falling back in love with materials. And I've been trying to kind of reconcile with that and understand that a little bit more. So it was great to kind of put this together and in context of that. So this image on the right is from Bemis, and that's kind of my starting point. I, right before COVID and lockdown happened, I was awarded the Bemis residency, and I really didn't take it lightly how coveted that experience is. It's 3 months paid. You get so much access. It's extremely supported. And shout out to SFAI alum Rachel Adams for being a support system there. It was nice to land and have a familiar face to be there, especially when COVID hit. They were one of the few residencies that didn't kick us out. They allowed us to finish our 3 months residency and took care of us. They really nurtured us. They gave us supplies. They just really wanted us to feel supported even through like everything that was going on. So we were able to finish our work, but it was a sort of missed opportunity in the sense that we were all making like really incredible work, but at the same time, no one was going to see it. And of course, like at that moment, it was like kind of survival mode for everyone and not really knowing what the future was going to look like. So from that point, and these are pieces of installations that I'll show you next that I put together at Bemis, and having that time and space really allowed me to kind of amplify my scale and also really play with the materials that I deeply love working with. Textiles is something I feel very connected to. I grew up around seamstresses. All of the elders, the women elders in my family, relied on sewing to survive in this country. They didn't speak English, so they would make custom outfits, baby clothes, embroidered blankets, like they would make custom dresses for anyone. And this is how they earned their income when they left Cuba. So I have this inherent relationship to textiles. And so I wanted to play with scale and installation. And these are some of the pieces I put together. Here are some of the themes that I feel like resonate for me all the time. And I kind of oscillate between all of it, and whether it's like social practice or like very focused object making. Community is something I'm always thinking about, and how I can be of service to. Accessibility, how can I possibly create accessibility with the privilege I have, with the access I have. Clay is just my kind of consistent lover as of the last 6 years. Physicality is something that I realize is very important to me, and I think performance filled that in some ways, and now the sculpture work does. Autoethnography, because again, I can't separate myself from the work. Language, I think in Spanish, I write in English, and sometimes there's stuff in between that kind of gets lost or just turns into something else. And I like making from that point of that in-betweenness. Translation as a failure and also as like a sort of superpower. And rooting. Rooting is the more newer feeling in my life, and especially since moving to Charleston. This is a piece that I made at Bemis. And again, it's like we made these installations. They allowed us to get our work documented. Mind you, no one was allowed in the spaces, but there was something kind of altar-like about being able to like suspend this piece up. And these are remnants of jeans that I'd collected over the last 20 years that my body had worn through. The other side is indigo dyed linen. I really like thinking about design and the history of design and trying to excavate it and understand the roots of things. And I naively always thought the cane weaving, like the kind you see on rocking chairs, was very Caribbean. And so I wanted to understand the roots of that. Where did it come from? How did this pattern come about? And actually the history of it is, it's kind of impossible to trace. And I love that even more, that there was no specific point of origin, almost like dismantling the idea of authenticity. And I wanted to sort of suspend it. I wanted to make this thing that you could almost like see yourself like flying through in a way. So this piece called Second Skin is one of the pieces that I realized there. We also had access to ceramic studios that no one really used, and I was in there all the time. I don't think I slept much while I was there. It was like an artist playground. Thinking about like home and things that are fleeting. This is my grandmother's phone number. And so playing with like the idea of clay and like permanence. Clay is this thing that's going to outlive all of us. I always tell that my students when I've taught ceramics is like, we're making stuff for the aliens. All of this is going to live far beyond our bodies and our existence. And so I have this deep respect for the medium and what I make with it. I almost feel like I'm leaving clues behind in some way. And these phone numbers, like phone numbers, you know, they're becoming obsolete. They're becoming things that we're not really interested in remembering or keeping. But these are phone numbers that are tied to very important relationships in my life. And even if I'm cryptic of what I'm making, I still like I know the message and what's going on. And everything about it is intentional. The color of the glaze, the way that things are stacked, all of it. So these are my first beginning pieces where I was really being kind of conceptual with clay. This is my best friend's phone number. We've been best friends since we're 5 years old. So those kinds of relationships, and through what was going on, it's like we were thinking about our mortality. What were the things that mattered most? What did I want to like resonate or leave behind? And it got me wanting to also make pieces that I could send people. I missed communing with people. I missed having coffee with people. And so what I was doing is I was using this excuse to make a vessel, not only as a way of leveling up my skill, but also as making something that was almost like a love letter, like, hey, this is in place of me. You know, I won't be there, but this is in place of me and this is custom made for you. This is how you translate into a vessel that you can activate every day. So it's funny to think that I started doing performance and then I ended up like playing with like making mugs, but it was like the moment called for me to use this material as a way of connecting. And so I would make these and then send them out to people. And I realized this is kind of like a very particular thing and it's also accessible. And then I started getting asked for people to make them custom mugs. They wanted to pay for them. People wanted like these small objects that they could like feel intimate with, especially as we were all being forced to isolate. Actually, these on the right were a commission for Kathy Liu, who is also an SFAA alum and a badass one at that. This was my first personal studio. After Bemis was over, I had my stuff in storage in New York. I was very nomadic up until that point, and I did not want to go back to New York. I did not want to go back to Miami. I felt concerned about going to very crowded cities. I also just didn't know where to go. And I think as a resolve, I was in my car. I had all my art materials in my car and nothing else. And I was like, I'm driving west. So this is Nebraska that I was driving from in the middle of the pandemic. And I knew someone from a former residency who had a room for rent in Ventura, which is about an hour and a half north of LA. I had the beach, quiet town, and I said, well, maybe I can hunker down and get through this and see what happens. And so for about 6 to 7 months, this is where I made stuff. All day I'd wake up and just like experiment. Stimulus money got me a kiln, a secondhand kiln, and a slab press, and the rest I just ordered. And every day I was outside in my weird little cement patch studio. I miss that little kiln. When things started to ease up, I was able to go to Missoula. I had been asked to go out there to do a flag project that I had done previously in Oakland and in North Carolina. And it still is. I mean, I don't like to say it's done because I keep it alive. And whenever I'm asked and invited to do it, that's when I activate the project. It's called My Story is My Flag. And it came about because DACA was being eradicated. There was a lot of stress around young immigrants not being able to feel like they can fully integrate and feeling unsafe. Not that different from what's going on now. And at the time, visibility felt like the solution. I don't think it's the case anymore. The idea of visibility has really changed as a concept, I think, for this community. And so the idea was that I'd teach them flag design. So I was very immersed in the flag design community, the vexillology, like academic community. I would go to conferences, I'd hang out with other flag nerds and flag collectors. And I taught these workshops on how to design your own flag because national flags weren't cutting it. We needed to talk about the complexity of our identities through design. And so I had done this in Oakland with a high school that was just focused on immigrant students. And then I did it in Graham, North Carolina, which is a small town in North Carolina, and community members volunteered to be part of it. This was also the site where the Daughters of the Confederacy protested the Confederate flag being taken down. So there's this like tension of people in the community who are particularly mostly of color wanting to get that kind of visibility in a square that had a Confederate monument. And so that's where those flags got displayed there. Here I worked with youth, and this was at the height of the pandemic. We did it all outdoors and park and rec, open air residency, and the University of Montana, Hipólito Rafael Chacon, he's a vexillologist too. He invited me to come out and design and teach these kids how to design flags. The youngest kid I worked with was 3 years old. He made a great flag. And it was about 60 designs. We chose 25, and I then went home and translated them digitally. Every student gets a workbook that I make. This is almost like a zine, and they process their designs in these analog little like zine books. And then we made them into almost like flag textile maquettes. And then I digitized them and had them professionally printed with a flag company that I know and trust in Cincinnati. So a year later, we were able to do the flag raising, which was awesome. In their new fairgrounds, they had these like beautiful flag poles, and we inaugurated the fairgrounds with these flags. The kids came out, raised their flags. It was really, really an amazing community effort. And I think it was also really lovely to, after having so much time apart and disconnected, to just be out and visible and then see these designs. And also the joy of kids. Like they're so resilient. They were so amazing through the process and how they talked about what they were appreciating. So many of them were like, instead of focusing on how hard things were, they were like, I love that I get to spend time with my family now. I love that everyone's healthy. I love that my dad's a pilot, you know, like really simple things that I think were really encouraging at the moment, psychologically in general. And then I always design a flag for the specific project and site. So the one on the left is I'm waving the flag for the project there. And the museum acquired all of the flag designs, and that's Rafael on the left, and Stony and Selisha, who assisted me and is an amazing friend now, and also introduced me to like understanding a little bit more about the native culture there, which is incredible. And this is Rafael just engaging with the students and talking about flag design. And you can see everyone's mask. I moved to LA and I realized I need to get back in my hands into clay. And I became part of Clay CA, which is a studio downtown in Los Angeles. I just would take up space, and the need for scale was like overwhelming. I overwhelm every space I'm part of because I just want to go big. And you know, in communal spaces, that's a little difficult, but they really like humored me experimenting and making larger pieces and almost like approaching play like an engineer. So I learned a lot there. I learned how to throw there. I learned how to like build large. They had a larger kiln. And with clay, you are very limited by the equipment you have access to. It's very equipment dependent. It's my one difficulty with the medium, but it's like it still doesn't deter me from wanting to do it. So these are some pieces that I was just learning through. And you'll see this piece finished in the middle a little further along. So we moved to Charleston, South Carolina. We were in Los Angeles, my partner and I think our priorities just shifted. We wanted to be closer to family, which was in Miami, but we did not, or weren't really willing to go to Miami. And we wanted to be somewhere slower and just different. It was that moment where it's like that breaking point when you're in a big city, and especially through COVID, a lot of people talked about moving away to somewhere quieter. We actually did it. And kind of blindly, we just went for it. Now it's home. It's taken a minute. But we were just enamored with the idea of like going somewhere quieter, having some more space and slowing down. And it did feel like it impacted my relationship to making and also to my professional art practice. Work is harder. There's, you know, smaller town, less opportunities, not super diverse, but getting there. And so the people I met coming in here were essential in helping me navigate how to like pick things back up. And Susan Klein, who's on this call, and I just constantly praise her because she's an amazing person. She was like this lifeline here. Wonderful, amazing work, and does painting, does installation and ceramics. And so she knew how to plug me in. And it really, I felt like the ceramics community kind of like took me in as soon as I got here. And that was just like incredibly important. And I think it's something I'm still very grateful for. And so I started teaching ceramics, hand building. I had been so committed to the medium that I developed skills, and not a lot of people taught hand building here. So I started teaching hand building. I started exploring my functional wear as a business. I'd never done that. And it was fun to like experiment with that. And also I met a lot of people through markets. I work with a lot of small businesses. This is a very small town, and it loves food. It loves tourism. It loves color. It's coming around to the color, but and dealing with commissions and wholesale. And so I started experimenting with how much I could do. And in the end, it can be a bit of a burnout recipe if you do this alone as a business and you have limited resources. So this is my garage studio. It still is where I work out of, and a lot happens in here, and I'm so grateful to have it. In the past, I've always shared studios, or like I showed you, had communal spaces. I outgrow it. very quickly. So it's great to have this space and just make it what I need to be. And I know it's a huge privilege and not everyone gets it, but this is part of the choice to move down here, is just having access to that kind of space. And so this is some of the branding stuff. I was like, I'm going to pretend I'm a business, not pretend, actually try, but getting the design going. Actually, Nikki Salcedo did this for me, who's a Miami artist, a wonderful, love Nikki Salcedo. As an exchange, we bartered. I made her some custom pieces, and then she did graphic design for me. And it's still the stuff I love. It's printed on every piece I make. It's in everything. It's just, I'm still in love with the design. So playing with, harking back to Miami Beach and my experience growing up there, and the shapes and lines of like deco structures and the blinding color of sun on my pieces. It's like, I want my pieces to look beautiful in the blasting sun, like the way you see everything in Miami. So that's usually how I photograph it. Everything, I'm really in love with this blue. There's something about this blue that I feel very kind of emotional and attached to. And so a lot of my pieces kind of are architectural in that sense, that they're somewhat deco. And I really approached it like a line of work. I love Isamu Noguchi, and I love that he had this like tandem, like fine art practice, and then also made products, and that accessibility of that product is what I loved, knowing that these pieces could find places in homes and be activated and used daily, and maybe provide a little joy and a little fun to like the everydayness. And it also felt like I was sending off little pieces of myself to people. And also the great thing about having a home is that you can get weird with it. I was like, I'm gonna make tiles for my shower. This taught me a lot about production, about doing large scale repetitive work. And while it's very domestic, it leveled up my skills, and it also taught me about capacity and like what I'm able to do. This was actually a very hard project to do. But I did learn, again, it's like this need for scale and trying to push myself beyond what I know through the process of learning. This is me at one of my communal studios, Studio Union, which great community, love very much. And they let me do stuff like that. I experimented with like glaze chemistry. I did markets. That was a great way to meet other makers. And then just working with designers to see if that would work out, not so much. And just playing with any kind of form making I could make. Growing up in Miami, everybody had these like large tacky vases that were always like glazed really bright colors. And they were like knockoffs of like designer pieces that you would see in magazines. And I wanted to play with making these monumental like statement pieces in homes where you'd walk in and your eyes would be pulled in. So like thinking about the domestic space a lot, I think is what I was like kind of hanging out in, because I finally had one of my own. Again, I was so nomadic my whole life. I've never lived in one place for longer than a year. And so finally I had this like place that I had to learn how to root and be home. And I was like, what kind of objects do I want in my life? Like what kind of things would I want to spend my life with? And then this brought me to production for other makers and small businesses. I'm very particular about who I work with and where I exhibit. Most of the places I exhibit are nonprofits, artist-run spaces. I've never been approached by a super formal like commercial gallery. I'd be open to it, but I really want the connection of the people that I'm working with to be solid. And so those are the kind of people I work with as clients or vendors. And I still do some of this stuff. Like I worked for a florist and I made about like 60 pieces for a wedding. And I went and I worked the wedding as a assistant, and it was like this incredible, massive Mexican wedding. It was fantastic. So seeing the pieces like exist in this like joyous space. And then I also work with a zero waste refill shop. It's the kind of shop you would see in San Francisco, and I love working with them. They're wonderful, and they like my work, and we've been working together for a while. And I let the scraps become these abstract pieces that can be maquettes. I humor that some of these like abstract works are potential future like large sculptures that can be in public spaces. So also being aware of waste and what doesn't get wasted as far as labor or materials. When I was working as an adjunct at the College of Charleston for a couple of years, my SFAA admissions gears were going. And I got the opportunity to start the first art-centered pre-college program in the state. So this is still going on. I'm not part of it anymore, but it's still active and growing. And it was wonderful to challenge myself to see if I could coordinate at this level and also provide access to youth, knowing, you know, that they can access an interdisciplinary life. They can access the arts. This is a viable, you know, we all have our challenges with being creatives, but people shouldn't be denied the curiosity or the space to explore their creativity and to dabble in different mediums. So I coordinated, designed the program, and taught the mixed media portion, which meant working with waste material like newspapers, magazines, items, fabric that I collected over time. And then the students would bring in their own items to make sculptures. And here's some image. And then at the end of the program, it's a 2-week intensive, and then they have a full-on exhibition. So these kids like get this like full experience of the arc of what, you know, it means to be an artist, to like make the work, to be actually very focused, and then to have the exhibition and have people see your work and feel validated for that labor. And it's amazing what the students were willing to talk about and make with the pieces. So, and many of them kind of funneled in to be enrolled students in the studio art program. And that's the point. It's like this can be a path for you. And some students just did it because they wanted to try something different. But either way, I just, again, this is where access was my concern, and I'm grateful that I got to experiment with that and start this program, and I hope it continues to flourish. So I got invited to do this exhibition at Ditch Projects. This is such an amazing space. Beautiful artist-run organization, has been around for a while in Eugene, Oregon. It is probably one of the nicest spaces I've ever made work for. I was invited to exhibit here, and I knew I wanted to make something site specific. Again, scale was something that I was like, I'm taking advantage of those walls. So what can I make that can play off work that I've already done, and sort of almost like the woven piece earlier at Bemis, like I'm like, how can I level that up and come back to this idea but amplify it? And so I use remnants from all my flag projects, again, thinking about how I can not make waste, make work with materials that I already have, and continue to play with this idea of the cane weaving and expand it. And it was just wonderful to have this opportunity. I hadn't really exhibited in a space like this, and it was just such a privilege to see the work and the color just kind of saturate this very white industrial space. And the community there was very receptive. I love working with artist run space. They really allow you to experiment. They give you support, and I just want to keep those spaces alive and keep them going. But I really appreciate being able to do this like large piece. And then it was also a moment where I can fold in some of these like pieces, this design pieces, and see how they display. Like I kept thinking about the displays and like, you know, the Met, how they have like all these ceramic works, like collections of ceramic works by artists, or even the museum, the Wolfsonian downtown in Miami Beach, how these objects kind of mark time. And I wanted to have a representation of each form that I had been playing with or reproducing over time as the Sabia collection. So a little disclaimer, this gets a little, it's tough subjects to talk about, but I will mention suicide and mental health in this section. I don't know if some of you may recognize this image from the recent Night Sky exhibit on Instagram through the alumni network, but shortly after the former exhibit that I just talked about, Ditch Projects, one of my oldest, closest friends from childhood, unfortunately, like took his life. He had struggled with mental health since we were teenagers, and we were friends since children. So I saw the progression as well as our other friends. We had a very small, tight-knit friend group in Miami that we grew up together with. Juan Diego was a wonderful, wonderful person, like extraordinary, extraordinary person. And I never want how I talk about him to be marked by the way he left this world, but it had a massive impact on my life. Massive. It gutted me. And I still get worked up talking about it. But I had this show lined up with actually an SFAI alum, Michelle Rahman. We had been talking for years. She is a professor, and she directs this gallery on the campus of Norcal College Art Gallery, which is about an hour away from LA. The demographics of this community college are very similar to where I came from. The college is mostly, you know, enrolled by students who are first generation, first time college seekers. Affordability is, you know, a thing there. And so she had invited me to come and possibly do a flag project. We were still not sure what was going to happen. And then this huge life event happens, and I couldn't think about anything other than this. I didn't know how to process this other than through my art practice. It was such a huge hit, and grief. I'd experienced grief, but not like this. And so I needed to go back to the basics. Juan Diego was probably my first champion. He was always so encouraging of me being an artist. He gave me his full attention. He looked at my work in a really distinct way. Even as children, it's like that, those moments of encouragement when you have that one person that's just like, keep doing this, just keep doing this, you know? He was that for me. He was like a brother. So I needed to put it down. And then I also, through the process of grieving him, saw friends I hadn't seen in over 10 years. It was like I was like re-confronted with my childhood, with my adolescence, with the best and hardest parts of growing up where I did. And then also managing this loss and the kind of loss, and learning to talk about suicide, learning to talk about being a survivor of suicide. And also knowing that where we came from probably had a big impact in how he did or didn't manage his mental health. And I knew this was like a moment I had to kind of figure out how to navigate this, not just for myself, but maybe for other people too. So the show became this massive purge of being present with my grief, going back to this medium of drawing and collage that I had kind of lost touch with a bit. And I kind of didn't care what anyone thought of the show. I didn't care. I was just like blinded through the process and just making and needing to engage in this way. And so it was a very mixed media show. And I have to say the reception was probably the best, one of the best lecture conversations I've ever had. There's a huge turnout. The students were just lovely and so receptive. Many of them started talking about their own relationship to mental health. It was a very generative experience, and I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. It was a scary, scary thing, but I'm grateful that Michelle and the students were able to hold space for me in that way and kind of meet me right there where I was at, even though they weren't dealing with the same grief. So I made pieces that were like love letters to him and things I collected from his apartment when I helped pack up his apartment. Pieces that were abstract that, like, you know, talked about our how special our friendship was, and also just trying to understand his passing and his transition, like what happened, the curiosity. It's like putting it down and also doing it through color. He was a person that was just like extremely vibrant, so there was no way that the work couldn't be vibrant. And so going back to the phone numbers, I made this vessel and I thought of like an ancient vessel. I was like, wow, if this ended up under the ocean and someone excavated it like 100 years from now, what would I want it to look like? And so even my palette changed thinking about him through the work. And this is his phone number wrapped around this like vase. Some of these are sun prints. I printed some of the items I collected from his garden, from the path he walked by every day, and then I did cyanotype prints with them, and then I did drawings from those cyanotype prints. He was the first person I took pictures of with a 35mm black and white, you know, film camera. And so there's a lot of reference to photography and going back to old photos and then translating them to this moment. This is him jumping off a massive tree into a lake in West Miami and Kendall. High tide. He was someone who was always in the water. He lived out in the Keys a lot for years, and almost like making portraits of the friend group suspended. Some more sun prints. That's a show that I think just had a massive impact in me, and obviously the life experience did too. And it made me start to think about almost like tenderness and other people's struggles. Like, I think thinking about this experience made me wonder, and also with everything that's been going on politically, what do people need? Like, Are people feeling heard? Do people want to talk through their difficulties? How can I facilitate a moment where they can do that? And how can I use ceramics and like the materials that I work with to create spaces that encourage that in safe ways? Because this like visibility aspect was no longer feeling like it was safe for people. I had a student once tell me in class, she was like, I don't always want to be seen. That is scary. Sometimes that is threatening. And it made me realize not everyone wants visibility. So I think it's being heard in some way. So I created these ceramic vessels that people can deposit their hopes into to go on as victory wishing stations. It refers to a poem by Ana Mendieta, actually, and it's translated to English when she says to go on as victory. And it's this sort of idea of resilience through hardship. And I wanted to create wishing stations where people could deposit written notes about what they want, what they're struggling with, and having this anonymity in the same way that social media gives you, but like less weird. And the idea was that then the wishes would be collected and deposited into different vessels, and they would be incinerated, and then the ashes would become part of the finishing of the works. So I created these different altars: dinero, amor, salud, which is like very reminiscent of Walter Mercado, the ever loving horoscope deliverer that we grew up watching. The azabache is like an element of protection in Cuban culture. I wear mine on my chain every day. So I enhanced it to kind of protect the space. I had a mal de ojo, like an evil eye, just watching the space as well. And then I collected the wishes and read them. I think I love creating spaces where people can feel safe being vulnerable. I just do. But it was very touching and moving to hear what people struggle with. And you could tell by the handwriting who's quite young. Someone even deposited and left a rock from their partner who had passed away recently. When people serve in the military, they are given like a stone, they're given like a medal. And then this woman left me a rock that her husband had left behind that he carried with him through most of his service. And she felt safe enough to leave it there as part of this exhibition. And it's just like people's willingness to be tender. It really gives you perspective, because all you hear is negative right now. And I think people are really looking for ways and opportunities to be human and tender and vulnerable. Maria, we doing okay?
You're doing great. It's
Okay,
you got still 20 minutes, so about maybe 5, 10 minutes talking,
just
and then
checking to see
Q&A.
if, yeah.
No, you're doing very well. But audience members, if you're thinking of questions, you could start putting them in the chat.
So after a few years of working here as a ceramic educator and really kind of seeking out connection with all of the ceramic makers, I realized there's just like an abundance of people making without the ambition of even trying to show, because it is incredibly difficult here. Charleston's very tourist oriented. There's one nonprofit space. It is maxed out with, it's just every space is just maxed out in demand. There's more artists than the city is interested in supporting, to be frank. I love this city, but it has a ways to go in that respect. And this is like a common, topic of conversation among creatives here. So my way of kind of filling a gap or attempting to fill a gap is I noticed that ceramic artists were not represented in any galleries. Very few were in any of the exhibition spaces, the museums, good luck. And I know that there was a lot of people making sculptural work, abstract work with this medium. This is a very intensive medium. It requires so much dedication, so much failure, so much experimentation. And there's a wealth of people here who know what they're doing, who just do it incessantly and don't have representation. And so I talked to one of the local exhibition, it's like an art center, community space, and I asked them, can I have a sculpture show here? And so this was my first like curatorial attempt. And it was wonderful. It was like 20 artists. We had this sort of library case. And again, it's like working with no budget, just with what I had access to and what the space was willing to give me. And it was wonderful. It was like great to see this communing of different ceramic studios, people who used to work together, people who teach in different spaces who don't always have the opportunity to commune. and to have all the works kind of hang out and be just see the light of day, I thought was really important. This was my piece. I included my piece in this. This was probably one of the largest scale bills I've done, multi-tiered, and I started it in Los Angeles and I finished it here. And this is the word kimbara, like the Celia Cruz and Johnny Pacheco song, kimbara kumbara kamba kimbamba. So this is a phonetic expression of the drum. It's not even a word. You look the word up and it's like I love these spaces or these words where it's like it's hard to define and it can mean this or that, but there's no real fixed definition. But this song is so essential to Cuban culture, to Caribbean culture, to salsa, to I think of parties, I think of communing. And I wanted to make a piece that was an attempt at physically expressing the power of the song. And so I thought the exhibit was just really fun to put together. And I was like, oh, I can curate. I can have very little resources and I can still maybe curate and give, like, maybe create a moment where people have the opportunity to be seen that don't get a chance to be seen. 3 years later, seems like there was still demand for the same sort of reach, and the community grew. I had a lot of great students that made incredible work, successful pieces. Some students who had never shown ever in their lives, but were like avid makers. And I wanted to create this opportunity again. So I applied for an exhibition at the Park Circle Gallery. And then I said, maybe one space isn't big enough. And I was working at the library in circulation. So I asked them, can I use this little gallery for like an extension of an exhibition? So I had 2 concurrent exhibitions. I actually just deinstalled the shows last week. This time we had 30 artists, 80 works. And I worked on this for about 5-6 months, happily. By then I had developed, and I think this is the core of a lot of my public projects, is like, I recognized I have to carve out the time to create the trust, to listen to the community and see what would work for them. This wasn't about me. So I have no work in the show. I wanted this to be a true curatorial exercise, and to just give, like, have the artists have a moment. So there's a variety of people here at different stages in their art careers. Some are engineers at Boeing, some own a coffee shop, but are making incessantly at work at home and never showing the work. Some are professional artists in their 80s who incredible wealth of knowledge, who don't always like get out and talk to other makers, so it was just also an opportunity for people to commune. And I really enjoyed playing with scale and how the space sort of came alive with color and these different forms interacting with each other. This was at the library, so this felt like a true little library space, and it was a bit smaller, but it was like the artists that had extra works, I put them in here. Also, the library is accessible to a part of the community that doesn't always feel comfortable going into an art gallery. Charleston County Public Library is an incredible resource for the unhoused community, for low-income people, for every kind of person you can imagine. And so I like the idea of this space being there so that more people felt comfortable engaging with it. And then these are just some of my pieces that I'm messing around with. Again, I'm limited by equipment right now, in all sincerity. Not having the proper kiln to accommodate the kind of big work I want to make is a challenge I'm dealing with now. I like being honest about my challenges, where I'm at when I talk about these things. We all know being an artist is glorious at moments and hard a lot of times. So we work with what we have, but I also see these as like maquettes to massive sculptures that maybe in the future can be realized, and continuing to play with like themes of abstraction, of being unapologetic about form and just making something that feels interesting and beautiful in the light, or talking about the legacy of my last name and wanting to make it in clay so that it lasts, or working with the vessel again, the like basic quintessential vase, or playing with clay, with the clay and making like larger scale forms of things that I just enjoy as like objects in my life. And also excavating like these moments in my growing up as an artist, like I learned about the snake goddesses, the Minoan snake goddesses. That was a really particular like moment in my learning about art history where I was like, this is what defines power. And so recently I've started to experiment with asking myself, like, what can I make? And I was like, I don't make figurative work, but if I did, what would it look like? And so this is apparently the direction that sometimes I want to go in. I wanted to make something that exuded power in the way that those forms, those Minoan forms did. So these are about 2 feet tall. The left side was a commission, the right one was the first one I made. And just going back to the things that kind of got you going in the first place as a creative, like I think obviously the grief has caused me to look back and think about mortality and also like where those markers were in my life that propelled me forward and made me further curious. And so I'm kind of somewhere in between there. So I oscillate between doing these like big pushes of public projects that service the public, I hopefully, and then coming back and kind of being really inward about how I engage with the material. And that's it. I still make flags sometimes. It's hard to have a clay practice and a textile mixed media practice because the cross contamination is a real thing, but I'm making it work until I can have a different kind of workspace. So yeah, I've never been on time.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Christina. This was amazing. And
All right, so stop sharing.
yes, please
Okay.
stop sharing. And then I'm sure we have some questions. I'm gonna all give you time to put those in the chat and I'll be reading them off and asking Christina all your all your thoughts and also comments. Feel free to put comments in there, whatever you feel, whatever you're thinking about. Um, Eduardo has the first comment. Love
Thanks,
it.
babe.
Knowing your work is very informed from your identity and lived experience. How has moving to Charleston, a more homogeneous and less
Mhm.
diverse place than Miami, San Francisco, changed and informed how you approach your work? And also love you, smiley face. You're the cutest. And it was really literally what I was thinking about too this whole time, thinking about
Yeah.
now that I know Miami so well and I've known San Francisco fairly well, thinking about those two spaces. And then I come from a very small space. I come from a village in Austria, so I know small town,
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, it's Austria, it's different, but still a great question. So what would you say to this?
I think it's been an adjustment. It's been a massive adjustment, and but I'm into year 6 of it, and there's days where I feel frustrated by how slow things move and change here, but I also feel like it's a matter of reframing how you can work in this space. Um, I think it's been difficult. I think in the West Coast and in bigger cities, you are invited to be loud. And I did so much work in San Francisco. I felt safe being loud and political there because it was encouraged because I knew I was surrounded by mostly people who were kind of on board with what I was saying. So in a way, it's sort of a bubble too, because you're contained in this like liberal bubble where you're like, I can be loud, I can protest all the things loudly outside with flags and my body and all these things, and not the repercussions. I don't feel like are the same kind of stakes when you live in a place like this. South Carolina is a very red state. It is the mouth of slavery, as much as nobody wants to talk about it. The history is deep, deep here. It's in the ground, it's everywhere. It's also been very welcoming in a lot of other ways. So there's tension in certain, I think there's a lot of stereotypes about how South Carolina or the South can be. The South is a very rich place too, and we find our people. And I think my tact just became a little different. And it also shifted with like where I'm at in my life. I'm not in my 20s wanting to do naked performances. And not that there's anything wrong with that. All about who wants to do that. I just don't, it's not how I want to navigate my life through my art practice anymore. And I want to find other ways. to kind of touch on those subjects and be maybe more subliminal. And so it's just shifted how I work and how I connect with people. And I think it's important to step back, like I said, and listen and observe. It caused me to pause and be like, you don't know shit. Step back and pay attention because you're not from here. I'm still not from here. And I have to respect that. And I have to just kind of observe what what could be of service here. And also like, how do I want my work to represent? I've also never made work for a gallery, for this, like for being exhibited. Like the work is the work. And then if it finds a place and it's visible, great. But usually that's outside of here. It's usually outside of here. So I think it's been an interesting shift. And especially with all of the tension that's going on politically, I'm often the only Latina in the room, even in friend circles, but that doesn't mean I'm not supported and I don't feel invited. There are moments of tension, but you figure out how to navigate it. And the art world here, the art community here is actually it's been quite inviting. It's intimate, it's smaller, but there are people who are of like mind. I don't know if that answered the question, but it's like
I did.
you have to kind of pause and read the room in a way and then see how you want to navigate forward.
Mm. And I think what you've also been doing already, right? Doing the pre-college program, like starting that first and only pre-college program here, and then doing these exhibitions. And now I also know that you're trying to maybe build something like I'm in like the Bakehouse, like an artist residency. It's kind of like it's pretty incredible what an impact you can have on if you're in a small
But it's
spot
like
like that. It
slow
takes
creep,
time.
slow
Yeah,
creep.
it takes time.
It does take time. And, a lot of those things we're still like, is this going to happen? God, we should just try, right? But it's a slow creep. It's
Yeah.
just different environments. So you got to read the room.
So we have a couple more questions and comments. I'm going to start with this comment by Joseph Hordado. Your strength and ability resonates proudly, and I'm grateful to be here. Thanks, Joseph. And then we
Thank
have
you.
Mandy. Would you say a bit about your drawings?
Sure. Specifically those or just in general? I mean, drawing to me was my first love. It's like the root of how anything starts. So when I say that, oh, I didn't draw as much, I always draw. All of these sculptures are a drawing first. The ideas are always a drawing first. That's like my first active translation. And I always told my students this, like you have to have an active sketchbook practice. Some of them hated me for it, but it's where the idea travels through the body and becomes like it's that first step in materializing an idea. So I have a very active sketchbook practice. I'm always sketching, taking notes. And even with the larger pieces, I have to draw in order to engineer the piece because there's a lot of components and I have to break things down into sections into how this build can be successful. So drawing is a sort of like it's a root like activity. And then, but I think I always felt, because I feel very apprehensive to ever say I'm a painter. I feel like I'd be a liar saying I'm a painter, but I paint. I use watercolor. I love mixed media. I love collage. I'm very maximalist about my color and my surfaces. I think with drawing, it's free abandon. Nobody can tell me it's wrong. It's my safe space. It's like, that was the first safe space I had. It was like, and as a child, it was just like I obsessively drew. Um, and so coming back to that now, this stage in my life, and also to have it support me through something so difficult was like, it's it's made me come back to this drawing practice with this love and respect and wanting to just come back to it. So this is one of my biggest struggles right now, especially with studio practices. Like I want a room just to draw, an untouched room to draw, because it's where anything can happen and I get very loose. And then as it tightens, it can be representational, but it doesn't even matter. So like even this is an ink drawing on a big piece of paper and it was very immediate. And so I know I can do that. I can do very layered stuff. Anything can happen with a drawing. So it is probably my favorite place to go, if it's a place, my psychological place to go.
So we have two more questions, and then probably we're going to have to wrap up the recording, but please stick around for the kind of after chat.
Mhm.
Susan Klein is asking, the spiritual runs through your work, the death of your dear friend, the snake goddess. Can you speak more about spirituality in your work? And then maybe also from Paul Welts, who were your mentors? I appreciate your natural and spontaneous approach to your work. And Mandy
Okay.
throws in thank you. So
Thank you, Mandy. Um, I think I'm still figuring out how to talk about that, Susan. Uh, I mean, it's pretty, I don't know. I don't know if it's pretty obvious to anyone, but I think my art practice has been this thing that has been one of the largest support systems in my human mortal life. I think even as a child, it was this space where I went to process, to get lost, to pull away, to understand, to celebrate. And so um, I think maybe just my art practice in general is this like spiritual practice, but I don't know how to talk about that within the framework of spirituality because it's almost like I'm still working through the inadequacy of talking about it as a spiritual element. And I think maybe Juan Diego's passing is allowing me to kind of resonate and think about that a little bit more because I feel like there's this like element of communication now that I have with it that is like nothing else. And so I'm still learning to figure it out. I'm very curious as to how like artists who've done that or like Hilma or Leonora Carrington, people who like have very confidently gone deep into using their art practice to talk through their spirituality and through abstraction too. And I'm still working through it. Maybe that's why I want to keep coming back to the drawing too. And there's this act of looking back and moving forward, like I'm somewhere in the middle, and how my work is kind of helping me process, or like it's that rope that I'm holding on to through it. So I'm still figuring out how to talk about it because it is spiritual, but how to define that, it words like kind of don't work in a way. The work works better for me than the language. I don't have language to talk about my spirituality, but that it's there, absolutely, because the reflex to in my darkest moment go there, that there's something about that. But that I know how to explain that. Am I in a hurry to explain it? Not really.
do you want to say something about mentors who
Ah,
were at SFAI, maybe even?
Alan D'Souza. What? Wherever you are in Berkeley or whatever. Alan D'Souza was my he helped me through all the bad performances. Crystal Lines too was fantastic. They made me feel validated in that um, I know performance was this thing that was very nurtured and fostered in San Francisco, and I think through identity performance, like I dealt with curators and stuff who did visits who just made me feel small and like I was doing something already done, and it was like kind of not about any of that. You know, I wasn't trying to like make a mark in the performance map. I was just trying to work through my own relationship to my identity, how to talk about it, how to talk about the extremes of it. And I feel like Alan and Krista really understood that I was in a process and they gave me intellectual validation, intellectual feedback. They made me feel like this was worth exploring and to keep going and to keep pushing. They were very, very, very supportive. I'll never forget them for that. They're just brilliant. They're brilliant people. And also just like my peers, you know, the people that I was in new genres with, God, what a special program. All the programs were great, but it was just like holding each other in these spaces of deep, deep experimentation in a place that was so charged with that and such a history was I I'll never like it was just such a privilege to go there. Yes, it was expensive, but I would probably do it all over again because it just I grew so much in those few years that I was there. I stayed to recruit people to come to the school. That's how deeply I believed in it. And it wasn't just me. Everybody that worked there had graduated from SFAI. And we weren't just desperate for jobs. We like believed in the school. We believed in keeping those doors open and having other people have access to that experience. So I feel like I still advocate the SFAI way, just in different spaces, and I call it other things.
Totally agree.
So I'm like, still doing it, because like, how else are we going to keep it alive? It's worth keeping alive. I can't imagine my life without that experience. So,
Yeah,
and I think a lot of us feel the same way, but yeah.
so true. Thank you so much, Christina. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Thank you for listening to me and holding space for each other. And I love you, Maria. I love how much you do for this community. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna